The passage opened into a chamber filled with chests and tables and chairs. There was little else to speak of except a few casks and some mouldy bread. But in the far corner of the room was a set of shelves. It was empty but for a large flat package on the top shelf. He glanced around as he took it down, then sniffed it.
"Smoky,"
said his mother. He pulled back the waxed paper. It was a side of bacon. He unwrapped it fully and turned it over.
"Nothing unsavory crawling on it."
He felt like ripping at the corner with his teeth, but instead he wrapped it back up and slipped it inside his surcoat. The passage continued at the corner of the room and was darker than elsewhere. He took a torch down from a wall sconce before taking one last look behind. The silence and darkness receded as he walked along the passage and into torchlight and noise. The rumble and clanking of heavy gears and the roar of falling water echoed along the side passages to either side of the low, narrow chamber he now found himself in. And now the cries of many birds, murders of crows, and now the barking and howling of wolves resonated up from unseen depths, and now the smell of burning.
"What has happened to Isengard?"
Finduilas said. As he left the chamber and walked towards the bestial noise, the air became warm. It seemed that the heat of many forges was rising up from the depths. The ringing of hammered metal, the sawing of timber, the cackle and clamor of orcs. The passage once more opened into another chamber, and to the left, a stair led up into torchlight and clamor. But at the far side of the chamber, the passage split.
"One way is as good as another,"
said his mother. He chose the left passage and was assuaged by the relative quiet as he walked. The sounds of machinery and orcish babble faded as the passage curved round to the left. Soon it started to rise, and it curved even more before straightening out. Now the passage widened and the walls were braced with thick timbers. He paused when he saw blue moonlight ahead and decided to throw the torch back down the passage. The walls here were topped by overhanging sods of earth. The entrance to these pits of Orthanc had been roughly and hastily dug. It seemed to be an access passage for conveying carts down to the forges and workshops below. He crept forward, keeping close to the left wall. As he neared ground level, he peeked over the rim. The ring of Isengard stood a couple of dozen yards ahead, and a dozen yards along the wall stood the gates.
"Lucky boy,"
said his mother. Boromir took another step up the ramp and looked back towards the tower. It was said that the grounds of Isengard were once filled with trees, but in the flood of torchlight, the trees had been replaced by orcs. Tree stumps dotted the field of mud that was once a verdant sward. Orcs with axes chopped at the remaining trees and stripped the felled ones, while others carted the branches away towards the tower. Orthanc gleamed dimly in the torchlight. He heard a movement from the passage below and looked down into the dark. Quivering torchlight swelled from the passage. He drew his knife and crouched as he padded down the slope. Two orcs quailed as he charged at them. He stabbed one in the chest, then hooked the other with his arm as it tried to draw its sword. He drove his blade into its neck and listened to the strangled, gurgling sounds as he lowered it to his feet. He checked the orc blade's sharpness but found it wanting.
"Boromir!"
said Finduilas.
"Hurry!"
He strode back up the ramp and again scanned the ring. Most of the orcs were towards the tower. There was a sentry near the gate and the doors were open, ready to let a patrol or convoy of wagons in, perhaps. The road beyond stretched off along the west bank of the Isen. Boromir waited for a while, but there was no movement. The orc was fidgeting, pacing and turning beneath the near flank tower of the gates. Boromir glanced back towards Orthanc, then waited until the guard turned away. He kept low and ran at the orc, holding his knife at his hip. The guard started to turn back, shuffling and swaying. Its arms lifted in an attempt at self-defense as Boromir drove his blade into its heart. He took its sword and ran to the round flank tower. Pressing himself against the wall, he inched his way towards the doors, glancing back across the ring for any unwanted attention. The approach to the gates was clear and dark. He took one last look back, then turned and ran. From the gates of Isengard, Boromir sprinted along the road. As he rounded the first of the rocky hills that reared above the valley, he looked back. Only the eastern part of the wall was visible, with the Tower of Orthanc peeking over the shoulder of the hill, and yet he kept running. Almost 2 weeks of crouching and lying down had weakened his body, but each time he felt like slowing to a walk, he heard his mother's voice.
This is no time for rest, Boromir.
The road continued along the riverbank, and he saw the red light of dozens of torches ahead. To the right, up the hillside, was a dense patch of gorse. He left the road and bent low as he watched the torches drawing closer. They danced and jostled beyond the river. The orcs were marching along the road on the far side. He looked around, up at the hillside, and then turned back to the patrol as it passed by.
It would be prudent to stay away from the road,
Finduilas said,
Thank you, Mother.
as though he'd not thought of that. He straightened, then scrambled up the slope, away from the road. Soon he was jogging along the contour of the hills, dipping down into the valleys and clambering up gorges rushing with water. It was hard going, but easier than spending another month in the dungeons of Orthanc. His chest was racked with pain as he tried to draw breath. His whole body trembled with hunger. His head swam as he thought of the side of bacon. After 3 hours, he finally let himself slow to a walk. The hillside now was a steady slope that rose from the valley floor to a straight ridge. The Gap of Rohan lay ahead in the weak pre-dawn light. After another hour, the hillside swept round to the west, and the Isen Valley fell away into blue darkness. The waning gibbous moon was lowering over the river, a shimmering blue thread that led south past the foot of Thryhern. As he took in the view, Boromir descried a movement near the fords on the eastern banks. He peered down through the gloom.
Your horse,
said Finduilas. Boromir's heart soared. He scanned the gap for any other movement. Lilac clouds edged with silver hung over the white mountains. There were no lights along the river, nor for miles along the north road. He dropped down the hillside towards Lostal. Even from here he could smell the mustiness of the river, and for a moment it sent him back to his cell in Isengard. As he reached the foot of the hill, Lostal trotted to greet him. She snorted and nodded her head before Boromir took her by the bridle and stroked her nose. His sword was still in the saddle sheath, and his bow was still strapped to the back of the cantle.
Clever girl,
he said. He looked with disgust at the orcish sword before throwing it onto the rocks. He let out Lostal's reins and reached inside one of the saddlebags for the apples he knew would be there. Lostal took one gratefully and munched the whole thing as Boromir stood in the pale light and ate his own.
a little soft.
His mother said. Boromir closed his eyes and sighed deeply through his nose as he savored the sharp, sweet apple. It was not the same as sitting down to a proper Rohan breakfast of bacon, eggs, blood pudding and fried potatoes, but it was the next best thing. He scanned the grey, silent land as he ate, wishing he could warm himself by a crackling fire. A heron was wading along the edge of the fords, staring at the water. His head shot down like an arrow, and he yanked a small fish up before throwing his head back and swallowing it whole. As he looked across the water, Boromir thought he descried a body, lying face down at the edge of the Aot. There seemed to be many arrows sprouting from its back. Boromir squinted in the pale dawn light and saw that it was merely a boulder, and the arrows were long, straight reeds.
The rivers are swollen from the autumn rains in the mountains,
his mother said. As he munched on the last of the apple, Boromir rubbed his wrists as though he could wipe off the livid pressure sores. He stroked Lostal's neck as he started to take stock of the things she'd been safeguarding for who knows how long. His water skin was full, and the bottle of Fegwine that Eomer had given to him was unbroken. He searched the rest of his bags and found his snares, his flint and steel, and his silver collar. He looked at the last for a moment before rewrapping it and stuffing it back into the bottom of the pack.
I'm glad that isn't lost,
said Finduilas. He unfolded the map just to see if any of the ink had run. He gazed at it for a while, not really taking any of it in, before folding it and slipping it into his tunic. Lastly, he found the letter in his messenger bag, saw that the seal had been broken. He looked around as he folded and returned it. Looking up, he gazed at the burning sky to the east. The Great West Road wound off through the gap. For a moment, he wondered if it might be prudent to return to Edoras to rest for a few days.
Haven't you rested enough these last 6 weeks?
From Edoras I can head north and make for Rivendell over the high pass.
She made no reply, but Boromir knew that there were as many rivers to the east of the mountains as to the west.